Welcome back to, I guess, a podcast of some kind. We don't have a name. We don't have anything. We don't have any branding. But we're just going to start, and we're going to see how it goes. And so, obviously, my name's Alex. Welcome to the Tow Piglet YouTube channel. I have my brother, my younger brother, Peter, with me. Peter, how you doing today?
Good. I don't think welcome back is correct. It's the first episode, so...
Look, it's the podcast is eventually going to get good when it starts out as a disaster. Am I right?
Good place to start. You can only go up from here.
Right. That's the benefit of being at rock bottom, right? Okay. Anyway, so we are testing out some ideas for the channel, and so one of the ideas that both of Peter and I have discussed is like, what about like a tech-focused trucking industry podcast, right? I know there's tons of podcasts that do trucking news. There's tons of other stuff that do, regulations, and certainly a lot of these podcasts do it better than I could. And so the idea is this is going to be a tech-focused trucking industry podcast, right, Pete?
Not exactly. It's going to be a podcast by a failed truck owner-operator, trucking company operator. No, I'm kidding. I would say it's a podcast maybe from a first person perspective, because there's a lot of people who do a podcast or blogs or whatnot, haven't had anything to do with the fleet, and so it's easy to be hypothetical and bird's eye view perspective on a lot of things with trucking, when the reality is trucking really is genuinely difficult day in and day out and week in, week out. And if you've never done it, it's easy to pontificate about what's hard, what's not hard, how to make money, how not to make money. And so given both of our experiences, and we can get into that, I think that's maybe what makes it a little bit more valuable, plus kind of the more or less, it is 2023, tech is light years ahead in every other sector except trucking. And it's like, why is that?
Right. And obviously over the coming episodes, we're going to discuss all this stuff. But really, this is going to be a good one for you. If you have advice, if you have pointers, if you have feedback, these are the first couple episodes is we're going to be the most receptive to them, just because we want to make sure we're delivering a product that you as the viewer absolutely enjoy, one, and two, can actually learn from. But you might be sitting here and looking at me like, who the heck are you? This is your first episode or first time seeing this. My name's Alex. I have a YouTube channel called Tow Piglet. I also had a carrier company called Tow Piglet. And I was... I was somewhat competitive, and on my YouTube journey, I documented the process of, being an owner operator. I don't think I had any videos from when I was a driver, but essentially I shared stories and experiences of me going slowly from one truck operating authority to taking on drivers to taking on owner operators and slowly growing my fleet. Now, what you guys didn't know while this was happening was it was always in competition with my younger brother, right? And so if you want some history about the channel, feel free to go watch some of the older videos. They're all really good. But so I think my backstory in the trucking industry has been basically documented here on YouTube really well. But now you might be wondering, like, well, who's Peter then? Okay, Peter's my younger brother, and he has a long story in trucking as well. Pete, do you want to share your backstory, exactly how you got into it and what you're up to now?
Yeah, you're not as professional when we don't have a microphone. I'm just throwing that out there. The other motivation I want to add is we talk way too much off camera about this kind of stuff, and so this is very natural. It's not like we're just talking for the sake of recording. It's like an 80-20. We're only going to record a percentage of the stuff we talk about. But my story specifically goes kind of back to 2012. I was 18 years old, decided to move to upstate New York, which is where Alex was living at the time. Talk about going way back. And I was always
go Syracuse. Go Orange, I think it actually technically is.
I definitely always wanted to do something in tech, and can we pause?
Do not disturb mode was invented specifically just for Peter because the notifications are interrupting the show already on the first show. All right, continue. So you're up in upstate New York, and where I live at that time, and so you wanted to get into tech?
Yeah, well, I already had an idea for the first website that I really wanted to build, but I had no technical ability to do anything, and so upstate New York was just bigger than kind of where we were raised. And there was just genuinely more opportunity. And that transpired into me getting into an internship that was centered around startups called StartFast at the time, which was a year later. So I was 19 years old. And they were basically this Y Combinator, Techstars, but in upstate New York, which is every summer they would get like six startups in the tech space. And they would also get a collection of 8 interns to help the different startups for the summer. However, one of the weird caveats was that you had to be enrolled in a college in the upstate New York area, and you had to be going after computer science or I think it was business. And so not only was I not enrolled in computer science or business, I also wasn't even going to college. So it was like, good luck getting into that. However, I reached out to the guy who ran the program directly. I met him, told him about the idea I was working on and why it failed and how come it didn't work. And he just kind of really loved the organic approach to business and gave me an opportunity as an intern. And so that summer, I was 19 years old, and again, zero technical ability to that point. It was that summer I was like, all right, if I can't learn how to code, being in a room full of all these people that I put on a pedestal, I'm totally screwed.
Right.
And so that summer, 3 months in, learned how to code. Objective-C was my first programming language, and I made the first app for StartFast. And so got it shipped and deployed for demo day, which is demo day is when they get a bunch of investors in a room and they try to get help. They try to help the startups raise money. Okay. What ended up happening after the summer was the gentleman who ran the program, Chuck, he offered me a position for his company to continue working. I guess he kind of liked the hustle. And so I continued doing iOS development for his startup, made another app. Then I transitioned into web development, and this is the first time of getting into like actual making websites and apps, if you will, on the web. And that exposed me to PHP, which was a backend, MySQL, first time getting into database stuff, and then jQuery for the front end. Did that for about a year and a half for him. Then I decided to do freelance because I thought, okay, 2 years in, I have enough experience. Let me jump to freelance. Big mistake. Well, what ended up happening with freelance was I would work too hard and not charge. And so, for example, a client would have I'd have a fun idea for their project, and they would go like, oh, it's fun, but it's unnecessary. And I go like, all right, cool, no problem. And I made it anyways because I wanted to make it, but it's like they didn't need it. So it was a terrible business.
Right. That's essentially, to make a trucking analogy, right? Because this is somewhat of a trucking podcast. To make a trucking analogy, when a customer pays you a partial rate and you ship it overnight.
You go anyways.
Okay. And so as you can see, as Peter's sharing his backstory, you can see why it's really important that he ended up getting into trucking somehow. But okay, so continue. Right. So freelancing, not a great thing or probably not where you wanted to be.
Yeah, didn't last. And I did have I did have a night gig. So I would work at nights as a janitor. Surprise, surprise. To pay the bills, because freelance wasn't enough. So I would clean stores part time just at nights to help pay the rent. And I would do tech during the day. Then eventually I started working on a startup called Carbon, which was actually with the CTO from the previous startup from Chuck's. So he was the CTO and I was just a programmer. And then we decided we got along really well, decided to do this project together. And this was real-time syncing of Google Contacts. So think Dropbox for files. This would be the equivalent but for contacts, i.e. if we're working on a project together and there's a contact I need to share with you, I can share it with you through this platform. But then let's say I update the phone number. It would actually update the phone number in your phone.
Interesting.
And so kind of a neat thing, you can have shared contacts. The fact that this still doesn't actually exist on iPhone level is kind of weird. You can share a contact, but it's one time. This would maintain its sync until you decided to unshare. And if you actually, let's say, removed a contact, it would actually delete it from the person you removed it from. So kind of neat. And this was my first time doing the entire tech build myself, pretty much full stack. So full stack, for those of you who are not familiar, that's basically you're doing the front end, which is what people see, the back end, which is what people don't see, and everything in between.
Okay.
And that was an interesting project because it took so long to build a perfect product. And this is an early bird mistake, and that is you take too long to make something and get it out there. And after about a year and a half of building this thing, it was ready probably way earlier than that. But I still wasn't confident in releasing it. And so we just kept delaying and delaying. That this was right around end of 2016, early 2017, January, that I was visiting family back over the holidays and decided that it would be a good opportunity to move back, that I could reduce my cost of living, live with parents, and then finish the startup and see it through. And this is where kind of trucking starts to enter the scene. Whereas our other brother, Igor, we're kind of like the Jonas Brothers of trucking, except not as famous. And so our other brother, Igor, just started getting into trucking. Now we're talking about like a single truck operation with an MC number type of deal, just loading yourself. That expanded to two trucks, and that was like year one. And so when I moved back, it was really cool trucking thing you guys got going on. I got my own web platform. I don't want anything to do with that. And slowly but surely, it was like, well, you have some computer skills. Why not apply those in our office? And that transpired into like me joining my brother's operation full time in 2017. And so this is where trucking happened. And then the other idea, carbon, that slowly kind of died off over the next 6 months. It was just basically impossible to code full time on that and help with trucking. And so year one of trucking was interesting because I did a lot of dispatch as well. It wasn't just high level making apps for my brother. It got to the point where I kind of ran the office and he was out on the road. So I would load and he was on the road. And but what ended up happening was a lot of trucking, especially back in 2017, even to this day, is like pen and paper.
Right.
It's so weird. And so coming from an exclusively tech background, immediately it was just a shock to the system. I was like, I can't believe that you could have an actual business and run it this way. And so I slowly started changing everything to a
right.
approach.
So, but really quick, like I think back in those days, which I mean, if we say that we're in 2023, so that's only 4 or 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think like people still sent faxes. Like it was legit. Like you would act like, hey, do you want us to email it or fax it to you? Like that was a legit question that occurred on a phone call with a broker or something like that when you're doing a carrier packet or a load or a rate confirmation. That was a question. It was like in 2017, 18. Do you want us to email it or do you want us to fax it? So yeah,
right,
brutal.
By the way, like absolutely insane. Like that, the fact that that's a question is kind of crazy. And sorry to the older crowd that thinks that fax is okay. Right. But anyways, year one, we ended up growing, got some owner operators on top of all that, and we grossed about $1 million in revenue, like a hair over $1 million. So it was like $1,035,000. Not bad. And anyone notice that? I think that beats Tow Piglet's year one. Just throwing that out there. And then it was next following year, and I'll just kind of do a short highlight reel. Next year was like 1.7. Year after that was 1.9, 2.3, 3.4, and then 4.3 million was last year. And so pretty good consistent growth. Some genuinely challenging times, but throughout this entire like 6-year period, I ended up making a bunch of custom software, dispatch, tracking portals, just really like anything I could code, I would code type of deal. Dispatch robot was an idea that was kind of grown in-house. Again, my idea back then was when I first made it is we're gonna be the fastest growing trucking company. And people are gonna wonder how we book so many loads, and it turns out it's just like this program that's booking the loads. However, in theory, it's a lot harder. Like booking loads is not the only hard part in trucking. It's like hiring drivers, keeping drivers, getting trucks, maintaining those trucks. Like there's a lot of genuine challenges. But that's kind of the brief highlight reel of like starting tech, just accidentally fell into trucking, if you will, due to just proximity. And then kind of realized that, at the end of the day, like I just genuinely love making apps and services. I genuinely just love coding. And when Dispatch Robot happened, it wasn't called Dispatch Robot at the time. For our own company, I gave it to a few friends in the industry. And that was the first time. So to give you an idea, Carbon Contact, the software management, was $3.99 a month. And I would try to get people to pay for it, and nobody would pay me $4 a month to use a service. When someone isn't paying you $4 a month for any service, it means it's not valuable.
Right.
Sorry. And for Dispatch Robot, however, people were willing to pay $100 a month. And so now you start to understand, like, okay, light bulb is going off of the same people who wouldn't pay for $4 a month are paying this. There could be something here. And with that kind of signal and kind of realizing, because I didn't know any difficulties that trucking industry had, being the outsider, but being an insider and being able to write code, like all of a sudden your brain is just filled with ideas of like how you could make something better. And by the way, in 2017, I actually don't think the startup space was was dramatically different in the startup space versus post 2017. A lot of venture capital and startups have risen since then. So we're not unique in realizing this opportunity / problem.
Right. And
That's kind of the brief story. And now we're here working on Dispatch Robot full time.
Right. And so another analogy, I guess, is like, you know why they're not paying you $4 a mile? Because shippers don't find it valuable. They only pay $2. Right? It's like if a customer doesn't want to pay that much, you're probably not solving a big enough problem. Is kind of the gist.
And honestly, like that was probably the worst thing to learn slowly was, we could probably still link this Instagram video that I have up there. We made this fully custom tracking portal that would be real time, so it would show exactly where the truck is, show you exactly how many stops they have, which ones are completed. You can click on the stop, you could see the BOL, you interactive 360 photos, you could zoom in on the freight, like before and after tarp. We did so many things, and your prices are too high.
Yeah.
That was the resolution. It's like, hey, really appreciate you guys hauling that load for us. That was highly important. We really appreciate the tracking, and it was $3 a mile. But this month we have to be at $220. So we understand you guys can't do it, but we're gonna $220 is our price point, and that's unfortunate. I actually haven't. It didn't hit me until a while ago, but I kind of realized like tracking. It kind of hit me as like ELDs should be the trackers. Like, how come ELDs are not the tracking service? And I think this is what Project 44 is trying to do.
Right. Wait, hold on. Explain.
By the way, they raised a lot of money.
A boatload of money, right? Yeah. Hold on. So what do you, when you say why aren't ELDs the tracker? Because I heard the opinion somebody say that like ELD, like separate ELD companies are going to cease to exist in general.
What do you mean?
That was the. Well, hold on. Explain what you mean by ELD should be the tracker.
Well, for example, so for us to offer tracking, it required a person to write a bunch of custom code and make it this entire platform and then give it to our customers. When Project 44 comes in and they just connect to your ELD data and provide that interface for everyone, but they do it through the broker on top of all this. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, why hasn't, like, the fact that MacroPoint exists is kind of insane and that people pay for this. Like, for anyone listening, MacroPoint, I think, is like, they're probably doing
huge.
They got to be doing, $20-30 million in revenue. I mean, we could.
Yeah, but they're part of the company Descartes, if I'm not mistaken, right? Like they're part of that's just a tiny little arm or tiny little segment of this company's overall maybe strategy. So who knows what they're working on? But what I meant by ELDs will cease to exist is because what is an ELD? Essentially a
electronic logging device. Alex, how do you not know that?
No, I know.
You said you were a carrier.
Hold on, but what is an ELD? Right? It's a SIM card with a board, a computer board or whatever, right? That keeps track. Hold on,
Tell me you're not technical.
Yeah. But that keeps track of when your vehicle is rolling, right?
Yeah, something like that.
And then, but from there, the app interface cleans up the data and whatnot and draws your lines, right? And so somebody told me that essentially ELDs are going to cease to exist, as in like aftermarket ELDs, because the OEMs will start to include the actual ELD device in itself that you can then just connect to. And so you can have whatever app you want.
But OEMs won't provide the ELD service. There's no way.
They might not do the service, but they will include the hardware in the new trucks automatically.
I wonder if the government would get in on that.
Right, and that's what the guy said that I was talking to. He was like, more than likely, the government might regulate that OEMs have to include this. You're just like they did with, those safety bars at the back of trailers, right?
Well, that's good regulation.
Correct. That's good regulation. I know I watched the whole video about it. Now there's a whole side impact one, too, that they're trying to get past because they're worried about cars going
Sounds like they're making
side.
bumper semi-trucks for an inevitable self-driving future.
Right. So, yeah. But essentially, like, the federal government does have the authority to regulate OEMs and what hardware has to be included, just like your DPFs, right? Like your OEMs are including DPFs not because they like them, because the government regulated. That's the only way they can achieve the emissions. So it seems like the guy I was talking to, he was of the opinion that that ELD devices on newer vehicles, on newer trucks, will no longer be needed because you could just plug in and your app interface can just collect the data from that truck, essentially. So
I wonder if OEMs would even want to do that unless the federal government forces them.
Right, and the concern is,
then the hardware sucks, and then it just doesn't work as good. It's like classic, typical problems, like making a product that you're forced to, not because you want to, or because customers want you to.
Right. It'll run on the CAN bus system, which has been like, which is a disaster to diagnose or something. I don't know, whatever. The CAN bus is I don't know. It's a whole can of worms that I can't even get into, but, and I can't get into it because I know nothing about it. So this is going to be our introductory episode. Okay. Yeah. It's going to be our first episode. A little bit of, obviously, a brief introduction for me, a little bit more about Peter. And the reason this is going to be an introductory episode is because I'm sure as our podcast grows and people ask questions, they're going to ask, who the heck are we? And so now you know. I think this was a good first episode. What do you think, Pete?
This is it?
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think that was just a persona introduction. Hopefully we can make it entertaining and valuable. In the sense that it's coming from people who've actually done it and not just like, oh yeah, I was a dispatcher for 3 months. It's like, I understand trucking. It's like, nah.
Yeah.
There's a difference between scaling. And there's a difference almost between like even just keeping it to yourself as a trucking company versus scaling it to, like we had 25 trucks, 6 dispatchers. Granted, that's a big dispatcher to truck ratio, but there was a couple reasons for that. So little things like that where scaling it beyond yourself becomes inherently difficult in trucking on top of all of the regulatory, the burdens that you have to overcome.
Right. And I think in 1 month, I had 27 trucks deliver. So for 1 month, I think 27. Yeah. And there was 1 month where I grossed. You
might have beat us on that.
Right. There was 1 month where I grossed, I think, 430,000 or something in 1 month. And I was walking around like with BDE, if you know what that is. Like I did 100,000. I did 100,000 a week, 4 weeks straight. And then of course the next month it was like 300,000 because half the people quit or something. Typical trucking problems, right, with turnover.
So revenue. It's easy to get excited by revenue. Revenue is exciting.
Right. It is. I mean,
it takes you a while to understand margin.
Right. Yeah, the profits is what should be more exciting, and that seems like the struggle in trucking, especially now. But yeah, so essentially, what you're saying is like, we're not two people that know nothing about trucking. It's like I certainly learned and I grew my business essentially from me being an owner operator on the road, grossing a couple $100,000 to slowly growing the trucking business, which we did. I think I did $1 million. I made a video about it, $1 million in 90 days. And so, like, if you expand that for the year, it would have been close to $4 million in the year. Obviously, your trucking business did $4 million or something. Whatever you just you said the numbers in the beginning of the episode.
Yeah, 4.3.
Yeah, so it's like. This was the friendly competition. So it's like if you were wondering, if you're ever watching my videos and wondering, like, why is Alex just growing and growing and growing and growing and growing? And like, this is why. Okay, I'm not gonna let my younger brother be better than me. What?
He just vlogged. There's really come on.
So
yeah, I would say correction though. It's not that we know anything about trucking. I would argue that I probably still don't know much, but we do. We understand the pain points very well.
Right.
Maybe that would be more accurate. What the solution to those pain points is are just opinions,
right?
But we genuinely do understand the pain points,
right.
And it's one of the weirdest industries. It's probably, I think, market cap wise, it's enormous. I think it's like 800+ billion. Mm-hmm. A lot of startups will go after markets that are 40 billion, 100 billion, things like that. So the fact that trucking exists as a market of 800 billion is incredible. And then you have this weird mixture of a huge regulatory burden and then like total chaos on top of that. So the burden of having a literal truck on the road, a truck and trailer for commercial purposes, is very specific, very strict, a lot of regulation.
Right.
And then you have the broker carrier interaction, pure chaos.
Mm-hmm.
It's the weirdest thing.
Right. And there's no one big player, right? Like when you think about browsers, what's the most popular browser? Google, right? It's like when you think about email, what's the most popular email? Sure, there's tons of other email, but like 90% of the people use Gmail, right? And so it's like in most popular phone, Apple, right? It's like, and so it's weird how there's in some industries there's one like big time player, but even with Swift, I mean, what do they have? Like 14,000 trucks? Isn't there like 3 million?
I think they're at 60,000.
60,000 or 16?
60.
60,000? Maybe with this acquisition, because they bought out some other company. But
Swift Knight?
Yeah, Knight Swift. How many trucks? Let's see.
Hold on. One combined Knight Swift will generate roughly $10 billion in annual revenue with a truckload fleet of 25,000 tractors and 93,000 trailers.
Right.
By golly.
Yeah. And so, think about it. So the largest trucking company in the United States, in a industry that does $800 billion, they only do $10 billion. the absolute
Right.
largest trucking company. That's that's relatively a small company by all accounts, based on how much market there is to grab, right? Like, so that's essentially the interesting part about trucking, that there is so many different players. Like, what is that? There's a word for it, Pete. You know.
Real quick, there's 4 million semi trucks operating in the U.S. as of 2021.
Jeez, and they have
And they
26,000.
have 25,000. Yeah, that's insane. Yeah, trucking is unique in that way because the barrier to entry. Oh, and then the other thing is, like, it's regulatory. It's huge regulatory once you get in, a huge regulatory burden once you get in. But to get in, there's virtually no burden.
Right, $300, you get your MC, you go grab insurance, and you're off to the races.
It's so strange.
Yeah, the interesting industry.
But it's kind of neat. Like it's one of those industries where on the outside, it's trucking obviously has a lot of stereotypes associated with it, and I don't think most people just appreciate trucking in general. Right. And especially like once you've seen it, it's like, let's put it this way: just drive home when you're on the going home on the freeway, going to work, and just like see trucking company. Like, it all kind of looks professional, and you might assume that there's like professionalism behind the scenes. There's like pure chaos behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Like the truck that you see with an oversized vehicle or something like that, they might be paying $2 a mile. They may be paying $3 a mile. You sometimes you see machinery that's on a semi truck, and you go like, man, they must be raking it in, and it's like pennies on the dollar they're making.
Yeah.
It's so weird.
No,
it's not weird. Like, we can get into it, but
it's an interesting industry. Interesting, maybe not weird.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, those are your final arguments, or not argument, final thoughts, right? So that's good. But we'll see you next week when we drop the next episode. Thanks.